Our next guest speaker is Ben Simmons. We're talking about responsibility in early childhood development and discrimination, and I've just touched something on his screen. Dear me. Ah, dear. Have you ever felt frustrated that you know you need a change or help, but don't know what? Worse than that, you know you need support, but you don't trust your school, work, or whoever to sit and listen to your side of the story. I reckon we can all identify with that no matter what background we come from. Ben is presenting a way of figuring out your own needs and then presenting them in a way to schools and other educational institutions that helps to actually get your needs met. Ben describes himself as clinically boring. This is his claim for him.
It really is.
Well, you can decide. Let's explore that. He's been stabbed by students 3 times and he's still a teacher. Not boring in my case, in my opinion. When he's not recovering from his 3 ACL operations, he's a runner. He's done a few half marathons and 1 marathon. I'd say also not boring. And he has aphantasia, which means he has no visual memory. It's also known as your mind's eye, which means he also doesn't dream. Please welcome the not at all boring Ben Simmons.
Thank you. I am the embodiment of neurospicy, so there's a good chance I'm going to be wandering at some point, just as a pre-warning. That's going to be a thing. All right, so I'm Ben. I wear lots of hats. So I'm a teacher, a researcher, I'm a counsellor and psychotherapist. I'm also a disability advocate. So I do lots of stuff. So before we start today, if people want to ask questions, they don't feel comfortable putting up their hand to ask whatever, I've actually got a little bit of an online thing that you can scan the QR code and ask that question, and throughout the rest of the day I can come track you down if you want. You just pop it in there and I'll come find you. I'll give everyone a second to grab out their phones if they want and give it a quick scan. It will just send you to a site called Slido, and you just type in your question.
Would you feel comfortable using
Oh, I would love that. I will try not to double up. Yeah, close enough. Right. Does anyone need an extra second for that? We good? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're all good, mate. Yeah. Also, as a pre-warning, Mandy has agreed, because I'm a chronic overspeaker, to start throwing things at me when I meet my time. Oh no, that was always the plan. All right. So today you're going to hear me say some very accurate but sometimes misconstrued as not nice things about schools and institutions and all that. And I want to preface the things I say with this. People, businesses, schools, everybody, they do well if they can, because it's a human imperative. Does anyone here have the capability to do well in situations and then go, you know what, I don't want to? It's just not what we do. So today, when I do say things, I'm always saying them with the intent that if people could have done better, they would have. Circumstances, lack of skills, deficits, even strengths can all be mitigating factors to how well we do in any situation. So, why even listen to me? Probably don't. I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to say things to you today after just prefacing that I'm a researcher, I'm a clinical counsellor, I'm all these things, which engenders something called authority bias. Your mind is programmed to save as much energy as possible. So if you've got an expert up here telling you things, your mind's like, they're an expert. They must know what they're talking about. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes. And I'm going to talk specifically today about schools. But this is also true for businesses, for bosses, for HR representatives, right? They're all doing as well as they can. But you guys also look at a person in authority. Yes?
Can you not tell them this? I'm the next speaker.
All right, next time we're going to have an email chain. Yeah. All right, I'll skip over this a little bit. Authority bias, principals, I'll talk specifically about schools then. Principals specifically use this to get their way a lot of the time, because think about it. When you're sitting at a IESP meeting or a special needs meeting or whatever they're called in your particular state, sitting across from the special educator, maybe a psych, maybe a doctor and a principal, and the principal goes, well, we just can't do that. You go, oh, I guess I can't do that then. And that's often not the case. What they're trying to say in that is that it's too expensive, it's too difficult, it's too risky, but it's a lot simpler for them to just go, I'm the boss, I say no, and you're just going to have to weather that. They get away with that a lot, and because they know they can do it. And I'll be honest, it makes you feel pretty crappy at the end of that conversation. And that's what I'm going to try and avoid today, is at the end of conversations like that, for you to feel that way. Now, one of my favourite philosophers, scientists, whatever you want to call him, Albert Einstein said this one thing, that if I was given an hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem. This is in essence what I teach, is very little of problem solving is actually done in the problem solving component. A lot of it is done in the pre-planning, in the figuring out why a thing is an issue, understanding the people's perspective in it, and then problem solving as a team, not as an argument. So today, this is what we're going to go through. Now, a lot of you were provided with this sheet as a notepad yesterday, but it has much more in-depth step-by-steps for what I'm going to talk about today. You're going to get a bit of a précis today. What I talk about will be completely applicable for schools, but also in business or anything like that, as long as you change principal to boss or whatever. It's exactly the same sort of tool. On the third page in, you will find a completely filled in, sorry, it'll be the second page in, you'll find a completely filled in sheet. That's essentially what something at the end of the process I'm going to talk you through today will look like. Being able to go into a conversation with the principal with a sheet that looks like that and go, here are all the issues, help me. All right, the big secret. The big secret in schools is teachers have no clue. They genuinely don't. Teachers, when it comes to behaviour, part of my research was auditing lots of universities about how they teach behaviour management in schools. Only one school had a very optional, almost never engaged in unit, which is Flinders University in South Australia, on dealing with children with behaviour. Now, with disability, it's a lot better. There are compulsory disability units, but what they mostly learn about those is about specific expressions of disability, not how to help. They learn content, very medicalised content, about if this child has a speech and language delay, then these are the types of things you do. Very rarely is it ever actually practical. So most of your teachers have no idea what OI is. Most of them actually don't know what type of interventions or what would actually help you. They're just guessing as best they can. They're doing the best they can because they haven't been taught either. And that can be really frustrating, I can only imagine, when you sit there trying to self-advocate to a teacher and they're saying, no, I can't do that, or I don't know enough, or the worst one yet is, oh, I don't want to touch it, too risky, right? Which I see a lot because they're trying to do the best they can, but they're scared and they don't know what to do and they're trying to protect themselves as much as possible. I'm not excusing that behaviour, but I'm explaining it. So, in order to bridge that gap between all of you being essentially the experts in the conversation about what your needs are, being the experts in the conversation about what your needs are, we need to start helping you identify why things are difficult in the first place. Now, a lot of you might have this experience recently. This, when flying, it can be one of the most challenging moments. Well, maybe except for seeing the same thing but with this next to it. Right? But this is a really challenging moment when flying. But why? Why is this a challenging moment? Well, you can't control it. You don't know. It just says delayed. I don't know if my flight's been delayed 4 hours, 30 minutes. Can I go to duty free and pick up some wine? Or is it I have to sit here, otherwise I'm going to miss my flight? It's unpredictable. I don't know when it ends. I don't know when it started. I don't know what to do with that information. Because I know that I'm frustrated, but I don't know why I'm frustrated. I don't know how long my frustration is going to last for. This, on the other hand, this is much more manageable. Because it's exactly the same, except now I've got an ending point. I know that I'm going to be frustrated right up to that time, and once again it's Jetstar, so maybe later, right? But I'm going to be frustrated about up to that time. I can go to a sleep pod, I can go to the bar, which is probably what I did, right? But now I've got an end point. I've got more information. The idea is, the more information you have, the easier it becomes to problem solve, and the more accurately we can problem solve. Because these two problems inherently have different solutions. The solution we make for a child that doesn't want to go to school, a child who has school anxiety, the solution to that problem is very different to the problem of why does school suck? How do we make schools more enjoyable? So it becomes silly to miss. Those are fundamentally two different problems that we're trying to solve. So if you can reflect back onto your either current schooling for the young ones and the parents here, or your own schooling, what was happening for you that was challenging, that you needed help with? And what was your first instinct behind why it was challenging? I recently spoke to somebody who had a fall on a playground, broke their leg. And their first instinct was, yes, go get all the help and all that sort of stuff, but it was, oh my God, now the school's going to put them in bubble wrap. I don't want my child in bubble wrap. All right? And they knew that. They could tell me that, but they couldn't tell me what their concern about that was. I don't want my child in bubble wrap, Ben. I don't want the principal to go, to wipe their hands of it. I don't want them to be put in a special soft play area. Not because I don't want them to break their bones. It wasn't that. It was because my child needs to learn how to be independent. They need to learn how to assess their own body and to know their own limits. But they couldn't say that. They just said, I just don't want them to have the thing. If I was helping them solve the problem of, I don't want my child wrapped in bubble wrap, we come to a very different conclusion, a very different problem solve than if we go, I need my child to develop independence. So step one is always figuring out not just what the problem is, but what your concern about the problem is. I'm going to steal Mandy here because I know she won't matter. Mandy currently has a oh, you can sit down, it's fine. I'm just going to tell a story about you. I tell loads of stories about Mandy, but Mandy currently has a broken toe, right? Very recently, right? And that sucks. That's a problem, right? The instinct is, right, my toe's broken. But what's the concern? Well, the concern is, now I've got to organise a damn conference and I've got to put things in place, but now I've also got to strap my toe. If we had just seen the broken toe and gone, right, that's it, laid up, call an ambulance, whatever, I don't know how bad your broken toe was. She just told me it was broken, right? But that's the initial impulse of schools, right? I don't know how bad the issue is. I don't know where the parameters are. The best way I know how to solve it is go to the extreme so I don't get sued, right? But once she told me, no, actually, it's not that bad. This happens all the time. Amber stood on my foot. Ow, sucked. But I'm just going to wrap it later. I'm just like, oh my God, are you okay? And she was able to go, yeah, I'm getting around fine, blah, 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 right? Then my concern was, are you okay? And as soon as she was able to tell me she's okay, then the problem I'm solving for is different. The problem I'm solving for is, Mandy, are you comfortable?
No.
Right, but there was not much I could do about that. She's also never comfortable. It's fine. She's a menace. All right. Once you've identified your need and your concern, the next thing is, it's a bit of a split between boundaries when working with schools and other people. It's about setting boundaries and knowing your legal obligations. Now, I want to briefly talk about boundaries. Normally I talk a lot. I talk a lot with teachers about boundaries because they're not great at it. But most of our communication actually isn't boundaries. Sometimes it feels like it, but it's not. Most of our communication is actually requests. We make a request of people and they go yes or no, and we're genuinely not actually that committed to their answer because most of the time we actually knew their answer before we asked. That's most of human communication. The middle bit, the bit where I play, is in negotiation and collaboration. This happens when you tell somebody something, you set a boundary, and you need to negotiate. So I could set a boundary. A boundary is, if you continue to do X, that's fine. But in response, I'm going to do something. If you continue to yell at me in this meeting, I'm going to leave. If you continue to put my child in bubble wrap, we're going to find another school. If you continue to call ambulances because my child stubbed their toe, I'm going to make a complaint. If you do something, I will do something in response. This is a boundary. Collaboration sits in the middle of that. If you do something, I will do something in response. If you don't want me to do that response, work with me. If you don't want that to happen, what are we going to do about it? A boundary is not, gimme, gimme, gimme. Or if you can't do that. I can't say, right, I'm making a boundary now. You can't sulk, Mandy, which she does all the time. But this is not baby Mandy. I couldn't find one of those. But
No.
yeah, love it. But you can never truly control another person's behaviour. You can only always make requests and negotiate, but you can never set a boundary about someone else's behaviour. You can never say to a school that if you do not change your ways, then I'm going to go do something. That's not a boundary. You can't tell them to change. You can say, if you continue, then I'm going to go do something about it. You can never change somebody's behaviour. Talking about changes to behaviour though, this is the bit of contention that I get the most pushback with schools from, in that there are legal requirements for schools. Now, on the sheet that all of you have, I've actually fleshed out a lot more the legal requirements of schools. Schools are signed up in general in Australia to a few different acts, statutory declarations and international declarations, but they all sort of boil down to this, is that schools are required, and required means must in this case, provide access to educational institutions on the same basis when your child has a disability. That means without prior consent, without prior negotiation, they cannot do something like put your child in a special class. They cannot do something like exclude your child from school camp. They cannot do something like say that your child can't come, I don't know, to the water park because the risk of breaking bones is too high. They are legally not allowed to do that. What they have to do instead is negotiate with you about if they're coming, how can we make that safe for them? What can we do about it? But they have to have the opportunity to access school in exactly the same way as any other child. And I get extremely passionate about this because the amount of people that I've had come to me say, look, the school wants me to do something ridiculous just because my child has a disability. Recently, I get a lot with behaviour kids that parents need to come on camps. Very recently, we had one like that for a disability as well. But you don't have to go on the camp as well just because your child is going on camp. That's not a reasonable adjustment. Schools must make reasonable adjustments. Now, reasonable adjustments does not mean the school needs to spend $6 million on making the school safe. That's not reasonable. I wish it was so much, right? But reasonable means to negotiate, to means some back and forth. If you think your child needs a full-time SSO, right, because they're behind or whatever, or they need additional support accessing different physical locations, that might be reasonable for their disability. But if it's not OI related, they might actually be able to say no. If your child is behind on subjects because of their OI, they could actually say no, because that's not a reasonable adjustment for the OI. So they're only legally required to make adjustments for your OI. In your case, excluding any co-occurring disabilities. The last part is they need to facilitate access to all parts of education. Once again, this is the concept that your child is legally not allowed to miss out simply because they have OI. This is also, for those that are interested, that last one is also the case for work employment. If you have OI and you've been told you cannot engage at the same level as your peers, and your company has chosen not to engage in a negotiation process for you, that's disability discrimination, essentially. Right, once we've done those, checking time, oh my God, information gathering is the next step. So once you know what your concern is, why it's a concern, and you've understood the legal ramifications and your personal boundaries, we go on to the most in-depth phase, which is information gathering. The reason why information gathering is so big, takes the most time, and is the most involved is because if we try to solve for specific, without specific information, we solve for the average, not for the individual. Schools are horrible for this because they have to, in some cases, try to solve problems for thousands of kids as cohorts. So they take the average. Now, there's a very famous US experiment in the military that happened in about the 50s where they surveyed all these pilots and they wanted to make the perfect fighter pilot jet cockpit. And so they made everything exactly average, under the assumption that if we survey everybody and we got the average of everything, then surely most people will fit in it. Seems reasonable, doesn't it? Brain loves that sort of stuff. Not one person was average on all the metrics. And they surveyed about 50 different metrics. Some people were average for height, but not for weight. Some people were average for like finger length, but not for arm span. There was no one person fit average. Yet this is how we solve problems in institutions. And this comes down to these two factors, in that if you collect data that is unrepresentative, you get unrepresentative data. That means if at schools, if you've gone in about an OI-related condition and they start talking to you about your child's academics, you're not solving for the same problem. If you go in about a broken bone and they start talking to you about how he's poking little Jimmy and it's a bit of a pain in the butt, we're not solving for the same problem. We need to make sure that the data that we collect and the data we give to people is about the problem we're talking about. And the second thing I normally bring up, mostly for my behaviour kids, but it might also be relevant for you, actually I do think it's relevant for you, is that all data is representative of the past. Just because you had a break previously doesn't mean you're going to have a break tomorrow. The human brain doesn't work that way though. It loves to be predictive, it loves story. So if little Jimmy's broken his leg, poor Jimmy, if little Jimmy's broken his leg on the playground yesterday, they're going to stress out about it happening every day for the next however long he's at school, because that's all the data they have. They're going to assume that that will be a possibility for the rest of their schooling. And that's just not how it works, but that's how the brain thinks it does. So specifically for school, some of the information that you can collect and present to principals, look, after experiencing day one for you guys are the experts when it comes to your disease, for sure, right? However, when it comes to schooling, some of the things you can propose, specifically if you're in South Australia, we actually have osteogenesis imperfecta intervention risk plan. So that's not very well known, but we have a specific plan for that in South Australia. If you are in a different state and you would like that for something for your schools to model off of, send me an email at the end of this and I can send it to you. Things that you can plan for are things like, does my child have an SSO? Where are the points that my child actually struggles at school because of their OI? What are the things you're concerned about? On your list, on your example, there's a big list of the different types of information you can gather. There is no such thing as too much good information, right? The more information you can present, because principals don't have time to think about these sorts of things. They rely on two things. They rely on you to capitulate, and they rely on authority bias, because they don't want to deal, because they've got lots of other stuff. That doesn't make them bad. It makes them doing the best they can, because they've got 1,000 other kids to deal with. So you need to be your child's advocate, or your own advocate. Or you need to rope in someone like me to yell at people. I love that. The next one is the sticky part, is the negotiation part. This is the part where working with schools often falls down because adults don't like being convinced to do things. They genuinely don't. Principals more so than anybody else, I've found in my experience. There are a few key things to remember when talking to somebody about your condition, about the challenges that you've been having. And the very first one is become a problem-solving team. It shouldn't be you versus the school. It should be you and the school versus the problem. And that's where most negotiations fall down, is that you look as though you're in adversarial conflict with a school. Because sometimes they might put you in that position. But if you can frame it as though, you know what, actually we're having these problems and it's you and me against this problem. Not me against you, not you against me. If you can sit in that space with the school, I find they are much more willing to negotiate with you. And if not negotiate with you, at least listen to your side of the story. Next, there is a way, I'm going to flip forward and back to slides. There is a way you can actually talk to people for topics that people don't like hearing and have an effective conversation. I call it regulate, relate, create on here because I'm bad at Photoshop. It's regulate, relate, reason. Regulate means talk to them about the issues that you see them having. When I talk to schools, I'll often sit across the table from a principal or a head teacher or whatever and go, you know what, I see having this child with autism spectrum disorder, behaviour, OI, whatever. It's challenging, it's stressful, right? It takes a lot of cognitive load. You feel like you're failing sometimes. I get that. Make sure that you express to them that you can see how hard it is for them, because it is. Whether they're doing a bad job at it or not is irrelevant. They're doing the best they can. People like being told that you see how their challenges are manifesting, that you see that it's a struggle, even though they're trying. Once you're able to get them on board with that, tell them a story. The brain loves story. Tell them your story. Jimmy fell over in the playground and he broke his leg. But you know what I thought when I thought about Jimmy breaking his leg? It wasn't that he has another break. That happens all the time. No, it's that you guys were going to treat him differently. It's very different when you hear a story. And if people can hear a story from you, they're already engaged in problem solving with you. And then finally, if somebody can listen to you tell them about their own feelings, can listen to a story, then you're in a position where you can problem solve with them. Because you've got the two important things on the table. Their emotions, your emotions, and the problem. You can problem solve with that. Now, I'm very aware that I'm about to start having stuff thrown at me. So I want to leave with a couple of things. First thing is, if you just give a teacher problem, you'll get a teacher solution. If you just give me a psych solution, like a psych problem, you'll get a psych solution. If you give an economist an economic problem, you'll get an economic solution. If you give schools a disability problem, you'll get a disability solution. If you don't want a disability solution, make the problem something different. Make it a social problem, a relational problem, an academics problem. Solve for the problem you actually want to solve for, not for the one that's in front of you. No, I won't tell you my story about Ben. The sticking point for a lot of families, I find, is escalation. Escalation is a completely appropriate part of talking to schools, of negotiation in general. It's not a failure of the process. It's just the next step. If you need to escalate, that's fine, because sometimes you need a new perspective, you need someone to help, you need to bring in a ringer, right? The best way to get to escalation is to know who to escalate to. If you've got a boundary and you can't enforce that boundary because you don't know who to escalate to, then that boundary doesn't really exist. And the messed up in that is when you do set a plan with the school, make sure that you have some type of follow-up. My story about Ben previously would have been something along the lines of, we put in place a plan and we enacted it and we thought it all went well, but when we went back to look at it, it actually started a new problem. And because we didn't do any sort of review, we didn't know about the new problem. When problem solving with schools, set a time in writing, in email, going, even if this is going well, we're going to review it end of term, for example. Or, when are we going to get together to make sure that the thing that we've put in place is helping? Because if we don't put in place things like that, little flags to tell us to do something, life's busy, life's hectic, especially if you've got a child that has to be in hospital a lot, right? You forget. So how will you know it's working, and how are we going to check? When are we going to check? I realise I've gone super over time, which I warned you about, but I am always happy to talk. This is my jam, right? This is the stuff I love to do. My research and my thesis are all in stuff like this, navigating behaviour management at schools. Sorry. I do have flyers and cards out there if you want anything extra. And also I'm here for the rest of the day. Come talk to me, talk my ear off, come get some advice if you want some. Just come vent to me. It's literally my job. All right, has everyone got that? Yeah, cool. All right, thank you so much.
I'm not sure why you're stressing about going overtime, because according to me, you're a little bit under time.
I was told 45 minutes.
Yeah, but,
and then you've got Q&A.
but that's fine. Okay, we do have time. So just take a chill pill for a minute, okay?
Have you not noticed I don't do down regulation?
No,
It is strong.
Well, that is something that I actually noted. What did I write down here?
So you pace it around like a hamster on speed.
No, I didn't say. Actually, that reminds me. Anybody here got a dishwasher? Okay. Anybody got certain members of the family who are allowed to pack the dishwasher, and certain members who are not allowed to pack it? Okay, right. So you'll understand this. My son-in-law Brady and I are both a little bit OCD, and we have a method for stacking our dishwasher. My husband and daughter can't pack a car to save themselves, and they can't pack a dishwasher to save themselves. So Heidi sent me this little picture that she found on somewhere the other day, that in every family there will be two different types of people. People who stack a dishwasher like a Scandinavian architect, and people who stack a dishwasher like a raccoon on meth. So anyway, back to Ben. No, we're not talking about dishwashers now. I've written down great information, clearly and enthusiastically presented.
What were you worrying about?
I think that was an amazing presentation. You really had my attention, and I think along with everybody else, I love the fact that your writing on your slides is a huge size, which is exactly how it's supposed to be. Yeah, don't worry about the colour. Anyway, I think we got your message, but I think we have to thank the not at all boring Ben.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if you do have a question or two, we've got time for two very quick questions. Okay?
Hi. My sister is a teacher in Queensland. She also has OI. She's worked with special needs for about the last 6 or 7 years. And one thing that I can say for me personally is that people are they always want to help, and I get approached so often with people wanting to help me with whatever, and I always have to, keep it down because I don't like to get help, I do my own stuff. The only time I need help is when something is high in like Woolworths and I can't reach it, Yeah, I can see. So one thing that she noticed in her school with working with special education is that the kids are not very resilient because the aides that help them almost do everything for them, and kids are clever. So as soon as they figure out that they don't really have to do much, this is what happens. So my question basically is, do you in your work encourage, for instance, the helpers and so on, to lay off a bit, make the kids more resilient? And also, I know, for instance, that a stat is that only 1% of kids in special ed actually become fully employed, which means we're spending millions and millions of dollars on special education, but yet the kids are not getting out there, being exposed and becoming all that they can be. So, you know, are you an advocate to help address that situation?
I love this question. All right, so there's a few things in that I'll tackle very briefly. I'm going to talk about a little bit of research about what support workers, ESOs, stuff like that. Currently, the research shows that having full-time support has what's called a negative p-value, which has negative statistical correlations and causations to academic outcomes. Essentially, that story that you gave is accurate to the research in that if we constantly give support all the time to students, the outcomes for them are negative because they don't learn skills. The skill they learn when they always have a support worker is, I can rely on my support worker, not I need to develop this skill with support so I can develop independence. That comes down, as I was talking about, you need to be really aware of the problem you're solving for. So if you're solving for the problem of this child needs to learn how to write their name, for example, then you might put a graduated sort of, we learn how to do one letter, then the next letter, hold a pencil, blah, 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 blah. But if the problem you're solving for is, I want this child out of my hair, then the solution is give them a support person. Right? So it really comes down to the thing that you're solving for. Second part of your question was about chronic underemployment, which is an issue all the time because I'm sure you must all have a very similar relation to this, is that we live in a world not set up for disability or neurodivergence at all. And so the employment system is not set up to facilitate specific needs. And unfortunately, we don't have the skills, the programs, or like the education around self-advocacy that is really required to be able to advocate for your needs in a workplace. When you have a disability, especially an intellectual disability, that's a double burden in that I might also not have the vocalization, the vocal capacity, the vocabulary to actually advocate for my own needs. So of course I can't be employed in anything unless people are directly telling me, do X, Y, Z in that order every day for the next 20 years. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but we also have to think about the fact that in, for instance, Job Seeker, we have a DSS service. So
yes.
There are people actually being paid to get disabled people into employment. So that the stats is so low and yet
yes.
you're spending all this money, you know.
No, I understand what you're saying. I am an advocate of employment, appropriate employment for everyone, because employment leads to better mental health outcomes. Having purpose in life is important, and lots of people derive purpose through their careers, through their jobs. 1% unemployment is ridiculously low and not okay. Once again, I think it's a problem of what problem are we solving for? Are we solving for unemployment, or are we solving for the problem of maximising people's enjoyment in work and therefore they want to go work? Those are two different problems, and I think currently we spend a lot of money on getting people employed instead of making employment so beneficial and so enjoyable that it becomes silly not to be employed. Those are two different problems.
Hi, Simon. Just a quick question. How do we deal with PE teachers
Yes.
for our child, grading them with D for the term because they can't provide
Yes.
apparently with the curriculum requirements for the term? We had that issue in primary school, and now he's year 7 in new high school. Yeah.
This is the stuff I get so passionate about.
I didn't do anything about it only because I really couldn't be bothered spending my energy on that nonsense.
Of course. Yep.
At the same time, I am really upset and angry about that
Yeah, be angry.
unfairness.
Be angry. Number one, be angry. You are allowed to be angry. Angry is valid. right? Because they should be doing better. They're doing the best they can, but they should be doing better. They have a legal requirement to modify the curriculum to a state where your child, whoever they are, can engage. Regardless of disability status, teachers have a legal requirement to modulate the curriculum to a place where everybody can engage to their level. If your child, for example, can't kick a ball, right?
Soccer ball, which is already written.
Yep.
We've got everything ready for them.
Then escalate. So once again, it's about if you've already got everything in place, yeah, it's just a piece of paper and it's not actually being acted on, which happens a lot, right? It is very common because people think like once we've written it down, problem solved, right? Escalation is the next step there. If you've done that, the teacher's not doing it, go to the principal. If the principal's not doing it, for most schools, most principals have someone called a principal advisor, go to the principal advisor. If the principal advisor is not doing it, go to the education minister. He has a legal requirement to follow up on every complaint. Right? And so the education minister will then send it back down the chain for a response. You will then get a letter, and if they still don't do something about that, go yell at your person for parliament. Like there's always another person to escalate to, but they have a legal requirement. Look, if you want me to yell at them, I'll yell at them. Right? It's my jam. But no, your child should not miss out on PE just because they have OI. And if they miss out on PE just because they have OI, get angry and get writing stuff because your child should be able to engage in PE. It's part of the human experience.
But what you're saying is that they should get graded on the modified program
Yes.
rather than relevant to the other.
Yeah. So if once again, if we solve for average, we actually don't meet for anybody. So you're right. It needs to be brought down. So we need to see progress. So if they can't kick a ball right now because it's a heavy ball, so we give them a softball, we're not actually assessing if they can kick a ball. What we're assessing is their ability to articulate their leg to pre-plan where they're going to shoot. Very rarely, especially in PE, sorry, just as a teacher thing, very rarely, especially in PE, are we ever actually assessing the physical application. We're assessing things like how are they moving their body, how are they navigating the world around them, how are they planning, how are they pre-planning, how are they engaging a plan. Like those are the really big things in PE that we try to talk about. We do have some milestone stuff if your kid is...
Tell that to the PE teachers.
Well, and unfortunately, that's part of my... I talk about my research sometimes, but part of my research is identifying gaps in teacher education, not education for education for kids, but education for teachers, because we're not good at it currently, and 90% of teachers drop out by 10 years. And so we lose a lot of people like me who have expertise because the system sucks. Sorry,
I think
taking up everyone's time again.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much, Ben. There's some goodies for you.